Lee Kuan Yew views trade as a means for the people to fulfill their dreams and drive for a better life. The blocking of trade will lead to war and a return to the traditional ways of conquest or influence.
Must also be prevented from rechanneling their energies towards expansion of their territories or their sphere of influence to get assured markets.
What does Lee Kuan Yew think of the impact of tariffs and trade barriers? 1985, he thinks it will affect developing countries' ability to service their debts. What are the ramifications of Trump tariffs in 2025? Would China's Belt and Road initiatives and America's banking sector be affected?
Let us then not forget, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, that protectionism and less trade means less growth for the developing countries. This also means that debt burdens cannot be discharged. Defaults may be inevitable, with incalculable consequences for the international banking system. And even if the banks survive these upheavals, these developing countries will have to abandon all thoughts of liberalization towards plurality and more democratic freedoms.
What would be Lee Kuan Yew's prescription for the Trump tariffs? He says, reduce other countries' tariffs instead. And being the #1 Singaporean, he has a special plea for Singapore.
America can legitimately and justly use all means to knock down Japanese barriers and obstacles to imports. Let me add and declare my position that 95% of U.S. goods enter Singapore duty-free and quota-free. And for 14 out of the last 15 years, the U.S. has enjoyed trade surpluses with Singapore, and we are not complaining.
What then are the impact of Trump tariffs on smaller countries? Lee Kuan Yew says they'll hurt twice over.
But for America to put up tariffs and barriers to Japanese goods, instead of tearing down Japanese barriers to American exports, will hurt the rest of Asia twice over. First, by having these same tariffs and barriers to overcome in America. Second, by not being able to sell to Japan because the Japanese will be selling less to America. It is right to compel not only the Japanese but also the others to help the system function better. And if threatening retaliation for unequal access to markets is part of this process towards open and fair trade, then so be it. America has the right to ask that those who have benefited from America's markets open up their own. Some countries, like those in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, have supported the U.S. initiative to have GATT begin a new round of discussions for lowering barriers to trade in goods and perhaps also to regularize trade in services. The answer to job losses is more, not less trade.
What about America's manufacturing sector? Lee Kuan Yew says that American manufacturing at the lower spectrum will decline with or without tariffs.
America can upgrade her declining low value-added industries, or they will continue to decline whether America goes protectionist or not. Just as the ancient agricultural societies of pre-industrial China and Japan, with their self-sufficient subsistence economies based on buffalo and manpower, had to change with the advent of steam and the industrial age.
Lee Kuan Yew says America has contributed much to the modern world, but also has a responsibility as the world superpower for the peaceful acceptance of status quo. A world war will be ruinous for all.
Rapid and profound change is the kind of world Americans have created by their inventiveness. And American legislators now have the awesome responsibility of deciding under what rules the peoples of so many different countries should undergo rapid changes in their ways of making a living and yet avoid violent conflicts. In every age, the leading power has to carry the burden of encouraging the peaceful acceptance of the status quo. This is done by punishing aggression and rewarding peaceful cooperation. The British carried this burden for over 100 years after they pioneered the Industrial Revolution. This responsibility passed to America after the Second World War. It is inherent in America's position as the preeminent economic, political, and military power to have to settle and to uphold the rules for orderly change and progress. And Americans are still leaders in a marathon for technological change and product innovation. American enterprise is blazing the trail into the microchip and computerized world of tomorrow. It is in the interest of peace and security that America upholds the rules of international conduct, which rewards peaceful, cooperative behavior and punishes transgressions of the peace. A replay of the Depression of the 1930s, which led to World War II, would be ruinous for all.
Epilogue. What about China and India? Lee Kuan Yew says the two countries have enormous landmass and massive populations of high-quality people. They would have progress even more had they joined free trade much earlier. But can tariffs stop China and India from growing?
In China, and to a lesser extent in India, we have such an enormous land mass with such massive populations and high quality that if they had joined the free trade world right from the beginning after the war, Hong Kong and Singapore may never have been economic miracles. Places like Hong Kong and Singapore, on the periphery of this huge landmass, became places of excellence because we arbitraged.
There are two scenarios for the 21st century. The first is bleak, if because of domestic problems the U.S. loses the will to maintain free trade. There are over 300 bills in Congress dedicated to the protection of the U.S. market. Protectionism and retaliation will shrink trade and so reduce jobs. Is America willing to write off the peaceful and constructive developments of the last 40 years that she had made possible? Does America wish to abandon the contest between democracy and the free market on the one hand versus communism and the controlled economy on the other, when she has nearly won this contest for the hearts and minds of the Third World? Never in its history has the peoples of the world enjoyed such high standards of living. For 40 years, the maintenance of political boundaries was made possible because thrusting and usually aggressive peoples have been able to fulfill their drive to better their lot through trade. If this method for adjustment and accommodation between societies moving at different speeds is no longer possible, then a return to the traditional ways of conquest or influence is likely. The Soviet Union, since World War II, dominates her allies as satellites in Comecon. The Soviets also maintain the balance between them and the other aspiring communist societies like Cuba, Vietnam, and Ethiopia. In like manner, without adjustments through open and fair trade, the U.S. must enforce some kind of dominance on her own allies in Europe and Japan. And America and Europe together must police and keep the peace between the other jostling and contending societies in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. The more dynamic countries, prevented from thriving through trade, must be prevented from re-channeling their energies towards expansion of their territory or of their influence to get assured markets. Unfortunately, or perhaps fortunately for the rest of the world, The U.S. Constitution enshrines a system of open government which does not allow its leaders to exercise such dominion over other countries and governments in the same way that leaders of totalitarian states can.
A replay of the Depression of the 1930s, which led to World War II, would be ruinous for all. All major powers in the West share this responsibility for not repeating this mistake. But America's is the primary responsibility, for she is the anchor economy of the free market economies of the world. In your hands, therefore, lie the future of the world. Thank you.